Hello, and welcome to the Project Relax Talk. I am your host, Smokey, and joining with me, as always, my co-host, Spooge.
Hello.
It's a special occasion. It's the 3rd of October, I believe?
Yes.
For the next 5 Sundays, we will be doing special seasonal themed episodes for the Relax Talk. And the first one will be an iceberg of the Bloodborne lore.
Ooh.
Yes, I will be taking the helm of this. This is me basically explaining the backstory and timeline of the events leading up to what takes place in Bloodborne.
Okay.
So, and we can start off with saying that the time does not start in the same time, nowhere near. It kind of starts centuries before, a few centuries before the events of Bloodborne is when it starts, and we have, I can't really determine, I want to say it was royal families, but we have 4 factions. We have the Thumarus, the Lorans, the Hintertombs, and the Izzes, and the evidence for these 4 factions are the chalices.
Gotcha.
They're the 4 set of chalices that you can find. And we know that it was the Thumarus I'm jumping ahead of myself already. So, these 4 factions, they discovered what we know as the chalice dungeons. They didn't build them, they discovered them. And not only did they discover the chalice dungeons, but they also discovered lycanthropy, vampirism, and some witchcraft down there as well. That's blatantly obvious. Something happened. I'm going to assume it was when they found a specific great one that we don't ever see in the game. People like saying that they found abretists down there. That's not who they found. They wasn't aware of what they found because what they found didn't have a form, and it was Odin from Odin's temple. The formless great one, Murgo's father.
Ah, okay.
The 4 factions found him down there, and it broke out. Something happened to where there's a few things that happened. One, the Thumaru faction, they caught vampirism. The Lorans, they became. It's not clear if the Lorans, if any of the other royal families caught anything, but the Thumerians definitely caught vampirism, and the Lorans might have became witches, but it's unspeculated because the Lorans, Hintertombs, and Izzes do not survive the war that breaks out over Odin. Like, a huge war breaks out over the Great One on who gets control of it, and this is about and it's not. I'm not sure if this is the time Cainhurst Castle was built, or if it was built when they first discovered the Chalice Dungeons, but Cainhurst Castle is where the original entrance to the Chalice Dungeons was. You know how in the courtyard of Cainhurst Castle there's that huge ass crevice that just goes nowhere, just leads to nothing?
Yeah.
That's the caved in entrance of the Chalice Dungeon.
Oh.
Yes. As the as the Thumerians win, we know that as the Thumarus win, we know that that the other factions, they don't necessarily get eliminated outright, but they kind of get absorbed into the Thumaru faction, and they become the Thumerians. And this is where the Thumerians come into play. They are the ruling class of Yharnam, but Yharnam doesn't exist quite yet.
Ah.
This is the part where the vampirism kind of infects the Thumaru royal bloodline, and the royals of the Thumaru family or kingdom now definitively have vampirism when the Thumerian kingdom comes about. So, and there's another thing that comes about. A coven of witches, the Thumerian the Bell ladies and Murgo's
Yeah.
wet nurse originally were just a coven of witches, and around this time is when they tried to perform a sacred ritual to obtain. What I'm going to believe is they believed it was to attain power, but it was really Odin trying to obtain a vessel. But something backfires in their ritual that they do, and they go into a deep sleep, and Murgo's wet nurse, the head witch of the coven, gets sealed away into the nightmare realm.
Oh.
And the ritual doesn't continue until much later on when Mensis comes into play. I'm trying to keep track of it. I'm trying to keep because
I got you.
because it's
And I'm just gonna. I want to clarify some things real quick so far.
Get you.
'cause I don't know as much. I don't know as much of the lore because already like some things are a little bit different than what I assumed.
Gotcha.
So basically, that why I would like the Cainhurst Castle, all that. That's separate from the nightmare in Yarnum that we see. It's good to clarify that, right?
The Cainhurst Castle that you go to is Cainhurst Castle. It's just it takes more it borrows on Dracula's tropes of carriage with ghostly carriage with no carriage rider.
Mm-hmm.
Carriage
yeah.
driver is present, and that's literally the only reason why there's a carriage that takes you there. The carriage that you see, the carriage beside you, with the dead horses and everything, that's not the same carriage.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just for visual.
I thought it implied that there's some type of weird.
Well, yeah, it's a ghost carriage that takes you, but it's not that specific carriage. Well, it could be that specific carriage's ghost.
The ghost of that carriage, maybe.
Yeah, but it's not an actual carriage that takes you to Cainhurst.
Gotcha.
And Cainhurst Castle was literally built it wasn't built to keep things in. It wasn't built to keep things out. It was built to keep the things in the Chalice Dungeon in.
Oh.
And that's why it's got the weird structure that it does.
Okay.
And that's why the crown of Cainhurst works the way, like, if you put the crown, if someone's wearing the crown, then it can hide half the castle. That's kind of why they wanted they wanted the creatures coming out of the Chalice Dungeons to be able to get in. But something happened during the war to where the Chalice Dungeons entrance caved in.
Okay. And I'm clarified now.
Alright, so now we are at the Thumerian Kingdom, and the witches have done their ritual. They are sealed away. They will not come back into play. And I forgot to bring up a few things. During the Challenge Dungeons, before the entrance caved in, there was a specific... I'm going to say she was a Thumerian, but it could have been any of the four. There was a specific woman that was ascended by Odin, and we know this one, and it is Rom. And Rom is the reason why... Yeah, I should have mentioned this. Rom's the reason why the Odin ritual to get him a new vessel failed, because her presence in the world kind of stopped it. There can't be two physical great ones at the same time, or as you can tell by the current state of Yarnum, it kind of throws everything into array, and most great ones get locked away into their own nightmare dimension instead of actually being present. And the fact that there's a Bretis and Rom both present in the actual world is why most of the shit's gone to fucking shit. It's just because their two presences are colliding and clashing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So Rom's present locks away and kind of holds the Odin ritual and forces the ascended witch coven to get sealed away. And they don't come back for a while. So we have Rom. and we have the Thumerians, and then this is where Bergenworth comes in. The Thumerians are very curious about Rom. They want to, not only do they want to learn about Rom, but they want to learn how to become Rom. They want to learn how to ascend with Rom as well. So Bergenworth is founded. And Bergenworth is solely for research on Rom. And they do all kinds, they take her blood, they take her eyes, they do all manners of wicked experiments on her throughout the years. And then this is when Master Willem comes into play. I'm not sure if he's the original master, but he eventually becomes the headmaster of Bergenworth. And he has 3 disciples under him. The one disciple is, of course, Lawrence. The other one is Garum. And the third one is not Mikolash, but it's Mensis himself.
Ah.
And they start experimenting with Rom's blood a little more than they do with her eyes, like Master Willem wants to do. He believes it's the eyes that make you ascend. And for some reason, Lawrence gets the idea it's the blood, because while they're experimenting with the blood, they kind of realize it has supernatural healing abilities. Unknowingly knowing a Great One's blood mixing with human blood isn't the best thing to do. It's kind of infectious. To the point where it causes lycanthropy. And depending on what nature you are, if you're extremely intelligent, most likely you'll become a brain sucker, and the lower your intelligence, the more beastly you'll become, if that makes sense. So the people with the high IQ become the people with high IQs become brain suckers, and they just want, and they have to feed off of other people's intelligence and enlightenment, and the morons become werewolves. So
yeah, it's just kind of like the default.
Yeah, basically, because there are some pieces, there are some cases of lycanthropy, like the fly people in Bergenworth. They got their lycanthropy through the eyes of Rom. They was infected by the eyes, and that's why Master Willem kind of halted all research of Rom and locked her away into the lake. Was because he realized...
You think that's what they did to those pigs, too?
Yeah, most likely those pigs are just experiments from Rom.
Gotcha.
And they kind of just did away and locked Rom away into the lake. And Master Willem didn't want to stop researching how to become a Great One, but he definitely wanted to stop researching Rom and her blood and her eyes and everything. And Lawrence did not want to. So Lawrence gets Garum and Mensis. This is a lot.
I'm following.
So Lawrence gets Garum and Mensis, and they decide to leave. They tell Master Willem.
Wait. Who is the? I just want to put some faces on these guys. Who is the old dude who is by the first part of the, when you fight Rom, and there's that old dude?
That is Master Willem.
Those guys?
That is Master Willem.
Okay, that's what I want to know. Then who?
Lawrence is the flaming cleric beast in the Nightmare Realm. Garum is the old hunter that sits in the wheelchair, and Mensis is the brain in the Nightmare of Mensis that you kill.
Okay, yeah. Okay,
and
now I'm caught up.
yeah. So these 3 guys, they decide they want to leave Bergenworth, and they leave Bergenworth, and they take a shit ton of Rom's blood with them, and they form. This is where the Healing Church comes into play, and they start researching not only Rom's blood, they just start researching blood in general. And finally, the Thumerians come back into play. We have the last pure-blooded Thumerian Yarnum, Queen, the Thumerian Queen. She is the last pure-blooded Thumerian. She's the only one that can trace her lineage back to the Thumarus. She's been living at Cainhurst with her royalty and everything. She gets wind of people of the Healing Church and how they're researching blood and all, and having vampirism in the royal bloodline, they get real interested in their research into blood. So her and one of her disciples, Lady Maria, decides to leave Cainhurst Castle and go to the Healing Church and help them with their research. This is where shit kind of gets a bit crazy, because this is where Mensis comes into play. His research is leading him to the second half of the Odin ritual to get him. He's not aware of this, but he is unknowingly discovering the way to complete the Odin ritual. The way to complete it, though, takes a massive amount of human sacrifice, and also has to take the sacrifice of an infant great one in order to complete it. And he starts experimenting with his disciples on who can get pregnant with a great one.
Oh.
Well, it's not one of his disciples that unfortunately get pregnant. It is Yarnum, the Thumerian Queen herself, that gets pregnant from these studies accidentally. He did not mean for her to, but Mensis, believing this is the only way of ascension, he tells Lawrence and Graham about it. Around this time, the Scourge has broke out. Graham has come up with the workshop, and Lawrence has developed the choir. And they are doing their own research into the blood. They're still researching the blood and everything, but Garam's more focused on eliminating the Scourge, and Garam's more about healing people, while Mensis is worried about the enlightenment part.
Yeah.
So he tells Garam and Lawrence about it, and they are not okay with it. They're like, no, we are not. They have to sacrifice a whole city worth of people and the infant great one. They're just not gonna, especially an infant. They don't care that it's a great one or anything. They're just like, we're not going. That's drawing a line. You're going too far. So Mensis, this is where the school of Mensis gets formed, and Yarhar Ghul gets founded. Because the school of Mensis and Yarhar Ghul is a ploy. He gets in a whole bunch of people. He convinces Yarnum, the Thumerian Queen, to come visit him, and he commences the ritual. He attempts...
Oh, shit, yeah.
He attempts to slice this is where it gets kind of... The ritual goes as far... He attempts to slice the Great One, Margot, out of Yarnum. And as soon as he does, him and the baby and Queen Yarnum kind of get thrusted into the nightmare. And the Bell Ladies get awoken. And they start slaughtering everybody in Yarhar Ghul. Everybody. And they just... Anybody they can't kill, they shove in those chests. And they're just gathering up as many people as they want to complete the ritual, because they believe they're going to free Margot's wet nurse. Margot's wet nurse is their lead covenant. She has ascended. She's just stuck in the nightmare and she can't get out because she's a great one. And we already have Rom in the present realm, in the current day, so it's kind of impossible. It's almost impossible for her to be free. It's not, but The ritual they're doing is not to free her. We will get back to that later. Yarhar Ghul gets sealed away. The School of Mensis disappears. The lecture hall where it just vanishes. And the location of where it used to be is right before you enter Yarhar Ghul for the first time. That there's a huge open space on your right. There's just huge crevice. That's where the school used to be. And it was just yanked into the nightmare realm as well. Because of the ritual. The disciple... Okay. That happens. Queen Yarnum's gone. Her disciple is left behind. And I completely missed... I skipped over something completely that's extremely important. So before the Mensis ritual and everything commenced, Lawrence, Garum, and Mensis was using Rom's blood to heal the people of the town, which is not Yarnum yet. They name it after Queen Yarnum after Mensis fucks up. And to honor her, they're like, we're going to name the town Yarnum. They start running out of Rom's blood after a while. And they don't have a way to get it back because they can't go back to Bergenworth to get more because Bergenworth's been sealed away from them. And if they try to go back, it will be a problem. So they have to get blood somewhere. This is also where Garum gets his disciple, also the disciple of Lady, I'm just going to call her Lady Yarnum, because her Yarnum's her name. Lady Yarnum's disciple, Lady Maria, decides to work under Garum.
Ooh.
And Garum falls in love with Lady Maria, as we know. And they discover a fishing village. This fishing village, they have a weird religion, and they decide to go visit this village. Just curious why they are worshipping someone called Cause.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just curious on what...
Some say Cosm.
Some say Cosm. They are just curious, quote-unquote curious, on this, so they go check out the fishing village, and they find out Cause, or Cosm, is a Great One. And with Great One comes Great One blood. So
Gotta get that blood.
they decide to convince the village folks to let them experiment on Cause. Unfortunately, they weren't really experimenting. They were just trying to extract her blood. And they kind of extracted too much from her. And they killed her. And not only did they kill her, when they extracted the blood, they kind of fucked up. And they busted her guts open. And it turns out, for some reason, she was filled with maggots.
Oh.
And these maggots, they didn't clean up the maggots, and the maggots end up getting into the ocean floor.
You gotta clean up the maggots.
Yeah, well, they don't, and the maggots end up getting into the sea and the ocean, and they infect the fish and everything, and the fishing village starts eating the maggots, and then we know what happens to the fishing village. They become, they get infected with fish lycanthropy, and in order to cover up this huge fuck up that Lawrence, Garum, and Menace just calls, to cover it up, they decide to just wipe out the village. They're just gonna kill all the villagers. They're just gonna wipe out the village and have it secret and deal away with it. And this is when the hunters get formed. So these three people, they have a major problem now. They have Great One blood again. Yay. But they are very aware it is finite and they need to get more. But they're not aware on how to find another Great One. So the whole point of enlightenment and of obtaining enlightenment is everything. The reason why Mensa started his research was to find a great one. Each person, Mensis does his thing that leads to the Yarhargul incidents. Garum and Lady Maria does the research hall. We know what the research hall is. It's where they take the people and give them brain fluid, and their heads inflate. And their experiments were to create the Celestial Ambassador. That was their experiment. And Lawrence kind of just runs the show. He's kind of not really doing anything. He's kind of just there and making sure everything runs right. Quote unquote, right? So,
yeah.
as Garum and the workshop are doing their experiments, they of course have a shit ton of failures, and then they create the living failures. And then eventually, they do succeed in creating a Celestial Ambassador, as we know. And with the Celestial... Oh, you actually fight the Celestial Ambassador they create.
Yeah, that was Mr. Jiggles. Right?
Yes. So, with the Celestial Ambassador, they finally are to contact a Great One. Unfortunately for Lawrence, before this can take place, Garum, he doesn't really reveal it, but it turns out Garum stole a third umbilical cord of a Great One from Bergenworth, from Willem. He did not let anybody know this, and turns out he discovered it allows him to contact a Great One. This Great One is the Moon Presence.
Ooh.
And the Moon Presence tricks Garum into a very convoluted plot to get its own vessel so it can survive in the real world. And Garum gets thrusted into the... he doesn't get thrusted into a nightmare or anything like that. He actually gets turned into an Amygdala, the very one that takes you to the old Hunter's Nightmare DLC. That is Garum. And it is his nightmare that he takes you to. He's literally living a waking nightmare. And he wants you to end it all. And that is his ultimate goal, is to have you end everything.
Gotcha.
And that is your goal.
So that makes more sense of it also being called the Hunter's Dream and stuff.
Yeah, it's Garum's. The Hunter's Dream that you're in with Garum is your dream. The old Hunter's Nightmare is Garum's. The Nightmare of Mensis is not Mensis's nightmare, but it's an amalgamation of Murgo's Wet Nurse, Mensis, Mikolash, and Yarnum. There is all their consciousness kind of melding together. Same with the old Hunter's Nightmare. It's just not. It's not just Garum's. Garum's basically just the hunter, the fishing village. Maria's influence is the research hall. Lawrence's influence is the rest of the old Hunter's Nightmare. So they are trapped in there. I was explaining the old Hunter Nightmare and how Lawrence and everything, how all the nightmares aren't influenced by one consciousness, but multiple consciousness that's trapped in that nightmare. That's why your nightmare is kind of just the workshop. You're the only influence in it, and your nightmare can't really be influenced too tough, so it just takes place at the worker's workshop. Hunter's workshop, I mean.
Gotcha.
Alright, so Garum disappears. Lady Maria gets super depressed. The research that they've done is complete. They've succeeded. So she decides she's just going to off herself. She kills herself, leaving Lawrence. Mm-hmm. This is probably around the same time this is happening. This is probably when the Mensis ritual is also happening. The Yarhargul incident. So this leaves Lawrence pretty much alone. He had his two best friends from Bergenworth have completely disappeared on him. Menses have been drugged into the nightmare Mensis and turned into that blobbish brain we see. Garnum has been turned into an Amygdala, and he's forced to stay on Odin's temple defending the old hunter's nightmare and the entrance to that. Lady Maria kills herself. Mikolash, Mensis's disciple, he, of course, was thrusted into the nightmare as well. So Lawrence, he has to do something, and he kind of works out of desperation. He takes the Celestial Ambassador, and he does contact Abritus. It's not sure if Garnum and Mensis was present for this. This could have happened before or after. It's not really. It's up in the air, to be honest. But he does finally get Abritus, and Lawrence finally has an infinite amount of Great One's blood, because he's learned from Rom that you can take Great One blood and how, and he's learned from Cosm how much you can take at a time before the Great One dies.
How are they getting this blood?
The Great One, the Celestial Ambassador.
Are they just like attacking it?
No, the Celestial Ambassador. They use the Celestial Ambassador, and Abritus just comes into our realm. It like opens a port, like the Celestial Ambassador opens up a portal to the Great One's dimension, and Abritus comes into Bloodborne's world.
Okay. So, and then when it comes, it's trapped and it can't move around?
No, they can they can communicate with Abritus through the the Ambassador and Abritus can actually hold conversations and stuff together.
So it's
willing. Abritus is willing doing that. Abritus wants to be worshipped, so in order for her to get worshipped, she's allowing the Healing Church to take her blood.
So then I'm guessing that when they did that to Cosm, that was by force?
That was by force, and they didn't really understand what they were doing too tough, because it was literally the second Great One they took blood from. So they kind of just kept taking blood, thinking they could take as much as they want, and the Great One wouldn't die. But that's not true. The Great One eventually does die.
I'm gonna assume that Cosm was probably weak too, right?
Yeah, seeing as she had parasites inside of her, yeah, that was probably weakening her as well.
Yeah, that's what I was just trying. I'm trying to put an image of how they're extracting this blood.
I would say they're doing it scientifically, but with Cosm, they kind of did it in a butcherous-esque way, because they do slice her stomach open and for the maggots to spill out.
Okay.
And that's also, I forgot to mention, that's when they learned that she was pregnant as well.
No, you mentioned that.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, you mentioned the maggots, yeah, but you.
Yeah, I failed to mention that she also the baby was already dead because the maggots was feasting on the baby. The baby was already dead.
Gotcha.
Like that's why the orphan of Kaz takes on a more humanoid appearance in the nightmare, because the people that saw the baby couldn't really make of what they were looking at. So it kind of just takes the form of a human, because that's what the human that experiencing the nightmare could process.
Gotcha.
So we have all that, and now we have Abritus, and she wanted worship, so she agrees to give her blood as long as she gets worshipers. But it turns out her worship kind of has a side effect to it. It changes. It kind of changes her work. Her influence changes changes her worshippers to the blue people that we see, the blue blobby people. For some reason, similar to the Celestial Ambassador, but it's not fully a Celestial Ambassador. It's like she's attempting to make a Celestial Ambassador army, but she can't fully do it for some reason. So, as that's so now we have Abritus, we have Lawrence. Cainhurst Castle has kind of just been out there, and they and Lawrence knows of Cainhurst Castle, and Cainhurst Castle starts becoming a problem because they are starting to send people asking about Queen Yarnum. Where's Queen Yarnum? Queen Yarnum's missing. Where's Lady Yarnum? And the Scourge is kind of getting out of control. Lycanthropy is not doing the greatest, and Mensis doing the shit he pulled kind of has Lawrence in a tough spot. He knows if the main population finds out the Healing Church is behind all of this, he's in some deep water.
Yeah.
So he forms the Healing Church Hunters, and these Healing Church Hunters has a few different factions. We have the Powder Keg, we have the Executioners, and we have the Crows. Those are the three main ones. They're very important. We know the Powder Keg Hunters were specialized in hunting down the lycanthropy people. The Executioners were tasked with taking care of the Cainhurst problem. And the Crows were put into place just in case any of the other factions went out of line. We also have the Radiant Sword faction, which is the main faction, which is led by Lugwig, who has the Great Blade. So,
Yes.
with his new factions and everything, Lawrence decides to do a bit of, let's say, damage control. I don't know when he's found out, but he is very aware that the royals at Cainhurst Castle are not just royalty, and there's a reason why their last name is the Vile Bloods. They have no Sumerian blood in them whatsoever anymore. That is gone. So they're still the royal family, but since their blood's not pure royalty, the Vile Blood last name is more of an insult than anything. It's like, oh, you're Vile Blood. And also, he knows that the Thumerians had lycanthropy, and that the royal family has remained vampires for a while now. He doesn't really care for that fact, and so he sends the Executioners and their Master Ligarius to Cainhurst Castle to deal with the problem. Cainhurst Castle was told that the Healing Church was sending a peaceful envoy. They let the Executioners in. Everything's going fine. And then out of fucking nowhere, this is when the Executioners execute their plan. And they just slaughter everybody in Cainhurst Castle. The women of Cainhurst Castle decide, instead of being raped and abused and mutilated by these vicious men that's just running rampant throughout the castle, just slaughtering and causing, they decide to take their own lives.
Yeah.
Most of them just slice their throats, but some of them slice their throats so much that their head comes off. Like, they just They are that desperate to not be violated by the executioners. But something happens during the Battle of Cainhurst Castle, and the executioners get wiped out as well. I'm going to assume a few of the executioners have decided. A few of the executioners unfortunately caught vampirism during the skirmish and went crazy, leaving Master Ligarius to have to deal with them. And those are most likely the gargoyles that we fight. The remaining... So it left Master Ligarius in a perplexed position. He could either abandon Cainhurst Castle, go back, report, and then have to deal with the remainders of the incident, or he could destroy the Cainhurst Bridge. He could use the Crown of Illusion to seal away half the castle and just stay there and keep it secret for eternity. That was his goal. Mm-hmm. And that is how Cainhurst Castle gets its gargoyles, gets its ghost ladies, and how Master Ligarius ends up in a perplexed it's because damage control. Mm-hmm. This is during this time when the executioners went out. It's during the same time the powder kegs are sent out to deal with Old Yarnum. And the powder keg incident happens. A huge majority of the powder kegs actually die. There's only 2 powder kegs left when we go to Old Yarnum, and they are actually descendants from the old powder keg. This is like maybe 100 years before the events of Yarnum. Like, all this takes place way before we even get to Yarnum.
Gotcha.
So, the powder keg incident happens, and we have Old Yarnum, we have Cainhurst, we have Yarhargul, we have the Healing Church and how it got... We have Bergenworth. And this is pretty much where we're kind of getting closer to the events of Bloodborne. Lawrence,
yeah.
So Lawrence kind of realizes his damage control didn't go so smoothly.
It caused more damage.
Yeah, it caused more damage than anything. So he decides to give Ludwig free reign over the Scourge. What that means is, if Ludwig even gets a hint that someone's infected, kill him. Just on sight. If they cough, kill them. If they too hairy, kill them. Just do not let the scourge spread. And so the age of Lugwig begins. This is when he's going around on his horse and he's just slaughtering just anybody that gets in his way, pretty much. That's why his boss room is filled with all those corpses and the river of blood is flowing out of it. It's because he literally has a river of blood flowing from... It literally leads from the Healing Church to him. It starts with him just...
Damn.
Yeah. In the nightmare. So that explains why there's that huge river of blood leading all the way up to the Healing Church. It's symbolic for his actual river of blood that he trailed through his campaign of trying to prevent the scourge from spreading.
Okay.
And something happens to him. I'm not sure what, but the Moonlight Blade is a great one itself, basically, in a sense, and it kind of twists and it talks to him and it communicates with him. It drives him crazy. And he just goes on a rampage one day and he kind of gets fused to his horse. The Moonlight Blade just fuses to his horse, and it takes the Crow Hunters pretty much all their manpower to deal with them. And that's what the Crows were for. The Crows were... That was their specific duty, was Lawrence needed a plan B just in case any of his hunters went rabbit. And so the Crows... The Crows prove...
who she's attacking, too.
Yeah. So...
Okay, yeah, but I'm putting it all together with like what I've played.
yeah. You can slowly, if you played Bloodborne and you know what I'm talking about, you can slowly kind of piece things together. And most of this is speculation. Yeah. Most of this is speculation because it's all from mistranslations and retranslations and stuff like that. I've tried to piece this together. Most people like saying Abritus was found in the Chalice Dungeons. I like saying it was Odin, and Rom ascended when they found them and everything, and that's when Bergenworth. And that's when all this takes place. That's basically where my theory diverts from everybody else, is from the beginning. So, Lawrence kind of had to put down his favorite hunter. And he really doesn't have a plan B. So, he doesn't have a plan C, I mean. So, he's kind of just left with the predicament he's in. But instead of closing down the healing church, stopping what he's doing, he decides it would be better if he amplifies the church. To the point where all of Yharnam forgets about Cainhurst Castle, forgets about Yarhargul, forgets about the Hunter's Workshop, kind of forgets about Bergenworth, and forgets old Yharnam. And we're coming much closer to the events of Bloodborne. We have now... The current, how we're standing is, there is Rom at Bergenworth. You have Abritus being hidden by the Healing Church. This is when the Witches of Hemlock Lane is actually about to come into play. We have the Nightmare of Mensis. We have Margot's Wet Nurse being a head witch of a witch coven that tried to do a ritual that backfired, and it did ascend her into a great one, but sealed her away and made her a servant of Odin for the rest of eternity. So, and we also have the old Hunter's Nightmare and how that's established with Garum, Maria, and Ludwig, and Lawrence.
Gotcha.
And now we can get into the events of Bloodborne. I'm not sure how you're special, but I'm going to assume you're a descendant from the same ancestors as Garum. Because it's just, you kind of end up in the same, Garum's so attached to you. You're either Lady Maria and Garum's child, or very closely related to each other because of ancestry. Mm-hmm. But something happened. You were taken away from Yharnam. But growing up, you always had this feeling, this urge, this beastlyhood in you. That just, you can't shake it, and then once you come up to age, your character comes to Yharnam. Now, we have many, many villains at play here. We have Lawrence, all the Healing Church is evil, and their whole spiel is about keeping the past a secret, keeping the healing church in power, keeping status quo. You have the Mensis people, which the second part of the ritual has not commenced yet. They are sealed away. Everybody's sealed away. Yarhargul is just living their life. That it has not fully commenced yet. The only thing that's commenced is the mummification of the lecture hall and the School of Mensis and the killing of Queen Yarnum. That's the only thing that's commenced. Because the witches that wake up sense Raman and Britis, so they hold off on completing the ritual because they know if they attempt the ritual, it's just going to backfire anyway. Because there's already 2 great ones causing mayhem and strife and craziness within the world. A third one would just drive the world to utter chaos.
Mm-hmm.
You come to Yarnum. You seek blood treatment because your beasthood has gone too much for you. You believe you've caught lycanthropy. You have not caught lycanthropy. That's why the werewolf that you see burns up, because as you got to Yarnum, you did catch lycanthropy because it's airborne now, obviously. You did catch it, but since you did the blood transfusion, it kind of saves you from doing it. And it kind of puts you on a path the Moon Presence wants you on. Because the Moon Presence is going to use you as its vessel. So it wants you to go around and clean up the Great Ones. It wants you to go to... It wants you to clean up all the scourged victims. It wants you to kill the cleric beasts, everybody leading up to that. It wants you to go to the old hunter's nightmare, take care of that. So the orphan of cause can't come out of that and become a great one and become a problem. Wants you to go kill Rom. Wants you to kill Britis. It wants you to go kill Margot's wet nurse and everything. You kind of get... You're successful up to Rom, and when you kill Rom is when the Bell Ladies of Yarhargul finally commence the ritual, and this is when all of Yarhargul slaughter. As soon as you kill Rom, Bell Ladies wake up, they start killing everybody in Yarhargul. By the time you get there, it is way too late. Yarhargul is obliterated. Most of its citizens are either killed or shoved into a chest waiting for sacrifice. And the witches kind of fuck up and prematurely start the ritual side of the Odin ritual. They start the chanting and everything a bit too early, and that's why everything's kind of in Yarhargul's kind of amalgamating together and everything. And when you come into play, once you start stepping up, they sense your presence because by now you've already killed a great one, and they know it. They're very aware of it. You might have already killed 2. You might have killed a Britis. You might have killed 3. You've already might have killed Rom by the time. But you've definitely killed a great one by now, and they sense that. So they go, oh, fuck. They're trying to bring the head of the Witchens coming back. That's what they believe. They believe they're creating her a new vessel. But they're creating Odin a new vessel. But unfortunately, when you step in to the place where the ritual's taking place, they go, oh, shit, and they kind of commence the final part, and that's how the Reborn is formed. The Reborn is literally just a failed attempt at making a vessel for a great one. It's just the citizens of Yarhargul just meshed together and turned into a mad morsive blob. So that's pretty much that. You go into the Nightmare of Mensis. You get Mensis. You kill Micklash, who is defending Mensis, who is the brain. You take him out of his misery, and you also eliminate Margro, and you don't eliminate Queen Yarnum, because she is for some reason stuck in the Chalice dungeons, because that's where Mensis did the slicing. That's where he sliced her, was in the Chalice dungeon. Somehow he gets into the Chalice dungeons, and that's where he slices her. And that's where her corpse... She's not dead, but that's where she's sealed away at.
Gotcha.
That's why the only place you can fight the boss, Yarnum, Queen of Thumerian Queen, is in the Chalice dungeons. It's because she's sealed away in them. And so you've eliminated all that, and it comes to the ending. As you know, there are 3 endings. One where you accept Garnum's offer and he kills you, you wake up. One where you don't accept his offer, you kill him and you become the next host of the nightmare. And then the third one is you ascend. All these are canonical to me. All these happen. You can either say the first time you wake up is because there's 2 ways this can take place. It could be the first way, which is you accept his offer, you die. You don't accept his offer, you become the host, and then you get enlightened. I don't believe that that's the way it goes. I believe it's the other way around. I believe you get enlightened, and now you are the current moon presence. And it's you that it's your player character that wants a new vessel to inhabit the world again. So, your new vessel has to go not through the same thing you did, but a similar situation to what you did to empower it and imbue it with enough strength in order to intake the enlightenment. And you succeed. The vessel goes, he kills Garnum, you embrace, the moon presence embraces your vessel, the moon presence embraces his new vessel, and the ritual, of course, for some reason, all the ritual so far seems to have 3 steps. The Odin ritual had 3 steps. It required the witches' first part of the ritual, then it required Mance's part of the ritual, and then it required the third part of the ritual, which was the Yarhargul incident. It's with any ritual that takes place. In order to acquire a Britus, they had the original living failures, which is literally just the people running around the research hall with the inflated brains. Then you had the living failures, and then you had the third step, which was the Celestial Ambassador. It's always a rule of 3. So, your ritual is not quite done yet. You have to regain your memories. And that is what the third playthrough is you doing. It's you reliving your memories from the first playthrough all the way up to the point where you meet Garnum. By this time, you are enlightened, you are a great one within your vessel. All you need now is Garnum to free you. The Garnum that frees you is not a real Garnum, it's just a figment Garnum created by yourself to host the dream for you. And he kills you, he beheads you, you wake up, and you wake up into the world not only as a great one, but a great one within a vessel. So any other great ones can't sense you, and you still have the power. that a Great One possesses. Thus, that is the true story of Bloodborne.
Yay!
It is a mess. I cannot explain Dark Beast Parl. He is just one of the he's just one thing that I can't explain. The Bloodstarved Beast is one of the Vicar Amelias that they were draining blood from.
Mm-hmm. I knew a little bit about Parl.
Well, I just can't fit him into the grander scheme of everybody else.
That's why he's not an important thing. He's just kind of linked with like the Tantarus and that specific kind of squad of
if
hunters,
anything,
but he's basically just a hunter that becomes a beast.
Yeah, if anything, Dark Beast Parl was just part of the one section of hunters, because there's more than the Powder Keg, Executioner, and Crows. There are more than that. There's like the Sword, the Saw. There's a whole bunch of that I just didn't bring up because they're not important to the overarching scheme that's going on. And the overarching scheme that's going on is a bunch of Great Ones are trying to take over the world. That's basically what it is. The Moon Presence wants to rule the world. Abritus wants to rule the world. Odin he just wants a form, to be honest. That's his main goal, is just to get a vessel. And then he wants to rule the world. Everybody just wants to... Rom, she kind of doesn't want to. She's kind of oblivious to what's going on. That's why she's called the vacuous one.
Mm-hmm.
It's because she's kind of just enjoying her enlightenment. And she wasn't even aware, like, for some reason, she wasn't even aware that they were taking blood or her eyes away from her. Mm-hmm. She's just completely oblivious to everything that's going on. And I can't really explain why. It could just be she wasn't really high intelligent when she enlightened, but she was intelligent enough. The intelligence level definitely holds a key to if you become a werewolf or if you become something else. It's definitely tied to your intelligence.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with how enlightened or how much insight you have, because insight's just another word for wisdom. Yeah, it's... Gotcha. I mean, that's literally what it is. So you become more insightful as you play the game. You become more wise as you play the game.
Ah.
But yeah, it all starts with a war between two factions that don't even exist anymore by the time Yharnam comes into play. The only evidence we have of them is they have chalices laying around.
Okay.
And I'm going to assume the chalices are cups that the royal family members used to... You know what? I can say this. I can say that the four factions in the very beginning of Yharnam's story are both kingdoms that are led by a royal family. You can totally say that. Mm-hmm. And the chalices are just leftover royal cups that they left behind. And they all had different, form. Because the Iz's chalice is literally just a rotten apple. So they like drinking from rotten apples and shit like that.
Okay.
The Sumerians catch vampirism because of Odin. He kind of taints their blood when they find him in the Chalice dungeons. And ultimately, that's why everything happens in blood, because Odin is trying to eliminate all the Great Ones and get his form. But the Moon Presence is just slightly better at planning. But unfortunately, it backfires on the Moon Presence because you eat 3 umbilical cords to make yourself a Great One as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Do you have any questions of anything? I completely skipped over the Hemlock Witches. They came
Oh.
about because the Hemlock Lane witches came about during the research hall. They needed materials, so they had the witches kind of go around and forcefully take people's eyes and livers and fetus. It's the ritual material. That's what they were stealing for the healing church and the research hall.
Oh.
Yeah. That's why the research material is nothing but like organs and eyes and stuff. They're literally going around. That's why the Hemlock witches have the scythes, and they kind of like gouge your throat. It's because they're trying to take. They're not trying to gouge your throat out. They're literally trying to take your throat.
Gotcha.
Yeah, they're just.
Um, if I had any, because there's a lot of information.
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
a
going
lot of
on in this
information.
world. And this was just the main things that were happening, not all like how you just mentioned about like the Dark Beast Parl and him discovering.
Yeah, yeah. There's
beasts or
little
thing and, like,
tidbits. This is just the overarching scheme that leads to the like. There are certain schemes that you do away with, like Odin's. Like you ruin his scheme altogether. Like you fuck his ritual up altogether. Like he was not prepared for you. He did not plan for you at all, and you just walk up in there and you make those bell ladies panic, and that's what fucks his ritual up. Because if you can kill Rom, you can kill him as well. So they're like, oh fuck, we better hurry up and get him out of here. Well, they believe they believe it's the head of their covenant that they're like, we better get her out here and get her the fuck away from here.
Mm-hmm. But she was how did because you fight her, right?
Yeah,
Or is
and
it, since it's the nightmare.
she gets sealed during the first part of the ritual before Mensis cuts open Yarnum. They do a ritual that makes her, and like they attempt a magical ritual to get ultimate power, and it kind of works, but it kind of backfires because what they did was get Odin's attention, and Odin was like, okay, I'm gonna make you a great one, but a servant great one. So serving Odin, and forces her into the nightmare of Mensis.
Okay.
And the only reason why it becomes the nightmare of Mensis is because when Mikolash and Mensis does his part of the ritual, they get forced into the dream, and their subconscious warps the dream as well.
In that ritual being the one with all the cage heads?
Yes. What
was that about?
They had to sacrifice themselves as well. They believed they knew that it was a massive sacrifice they had to do. Like they knew they had to sacrifice a shit ton of people. They just didn't want to sacrifice a whole city's worth of people. Even Mensis was against that, so he just decided to have his whole lecture hall sacrifice themselves instead.
Okay, yeah, and then because it seems like they could sacrifice themselves, but it would take them into because like Mikolash was he sacrificed himself, right?
Yeah, he's the corpse you inspect.
Yeah. So, but he could, even though he's dead, he was still in his dream.
I can make Mikolash Mikolash. He kind of sabotaged the ritual. He's because he is a survivor from the fishing village, and that's why he's so obsessed about Cos and Cosm, because he was one of the worshippers of Cos and Cosm, and the only reason why he came about was because he knew it was the healing church's fault. The fishing village got eliminated, so he decided to infiltrate and fuck them up. And how he does that is by sabotaging the ritual further.
Okay. Using his knowledge, keeping awake after he died.
Yeah, definitely. Well, he was kind of already
keep it
enlightened
asleep.
by Cause and Cosm kind of gave him being more aware of what was going on. He was able to stay awake.
Yeah, or asleep.
Well, yeah,
because you wake him up.
yeah. He stays
forgets everything.
subconsciously awake.
Yeah.
And how I know he was really against Menses is he has the brain locked away. He has the brain chained up and locked away in a tower. Like that was his pun. Menses he wasn't aware Menses was going to become the amalgamation he does in the dream, but it just made it a lot more easier for him to capture and trap Menses into the Menses dream nightmare.
Okay. So so then you have the and I'm talking about the other amygdala, the amygdala's nightmare, the main, not the DLC one.
The one that you
That's
fight.
just an amygdala. That's not really important.
That amygdala is a deterrent. It is basically a failsafe. The first part of the Nightmare Frontier you go to is attached, is the original state of the nightmare before Menses and Mekalesh get into it, and the amygdala is just like what's the word for it? False herring.
Okay.
It's a misdirection. It's
red herring.
Red herring. Red herring. Yes, a red herring to kind of basically convince you the nightmare is done with, but obviously it's not, because you don't get thrusted out of the nightmare until you kill Margot's wet nurse, which is the original host.
Okay.
Anything else?
And so I'm thinking of any other weird bosses and characters that wouldn't have been explained somewhat in here. I mean, that explains what the fuck's his face. Because he was an executioner and he wants to kill the Vile Bloods because that was their mission.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think I'm good with questions.
All
I
right.
think that explained it all.
Cool. Well,
As much as you can.
Yeah, there. Well, I would need in order for me to go deep into it, I would have to have like the cliff notes pulled up in front of me, and I would have to go through each individual, and then we would be hopping all over the timeline, and I try to keep it. I try to keep it within the timeline, because there's shit that happens in the beginning that doesn't fucking matter until way later on, until shit's done hit the fan. It's like, that's when they come into play. It's like, oh, okay. It's just set up way late. It's like there's a shit ton of Chekhov's guns in this story. Like there's a lot of showing and not telling until the very last second.
And there's the whole theory that it's also a painting in the Dark Souls
Yes,
world.
it could be a painting. It could be,
because that would explain how Patches got there.
Yeah, it would. It would also explain why he's sort of more of a spider than anything, because she painted him as a spider.
Which is, fitting. Though he does have a redemption arc in 3.
Yeah, kind of.
Supposedly.
Well, he's the only one that fucking, you can keep Rat alive if you, because he wants to keep, he's very heroic, he keeps Rat alive.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into Dark Souls 3 right now.
Yeah.
That was the...
But go on.
That I was just gonna say that that's pretty much the Bloodborne lore that I can get into right now.
I think it was covered very well.
All right, thank you. If you've been listening this long, thank you for listening this long. Please like or dislike the video. Give us your opinion in the comments section of what you think. Share us some Bloodborne theories, you know. Let's open up a dialogue for once.
Yeah, come on, guys. Stop just trying to get sex and posting links.
Yeah, stop with that nastiness. We know what you're looking for.
Stop being sex bots.
It's got to be.
We're not prudes or anything. Just like, come on. If bots do a better job at hiding the fact you're bots.
Especially the bots. The bots definitely need to do a better job.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely share the video around, please. I would like this one to get out. And subscribe and turn on notifications. This will be a bye-bye for me, unless Spooge wants to add anything before we go.
No, I don't have anything to add. Bye-bye.
Alright, this will be a bye-bye.